Hello, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be going over an inverse functions calculus problem. I recommend pausing the video first and trying the problem yourself before you see me solve it. Without wasting any time, let's get into it. So the question says, let f of x equal x squared plus 3 for x greater than or equal to 0. And it says, let g of x be the inverse function of f of x. So, and then it asks us, 1, find g of 7, and 2, find g prime of 7. So first, let's review what an inverse function is. So, let's say I was solving for like f of 1, right? F of 1. Now, how would you solve that? You just plug in 1 for as your input. So 1 for x. So 1 squared plus 3. F of 1 equals 1 plus 3, which is 4, right? So for the inverse function, all you need to know is that the inputs and the outputs are switched. So what I mean by that is this 1 is your input and 4 is your output, right? So that means g of 4 would just equal 1. This was your input and this was your output, but now they're just switched because this went here and this went here. So this is what an inverse function is, right? So now we can solve question 1. Question 1 says, find g of 7. So g of 7, let's say that equals a value x, right? So that would mean f of x would equal 7. And that's just the same logic. You're just swapping the inputs and the outputs. And since we already have the equation for f of x, x squared plus 3, we can just set that equal to 7 and see for what value of x, what number we plug in for x, we get 7. So now x squared plus 3, which is f of x, and we need to see what we need to plug in for x into the function f to get 7. So just set 7 equal to x squared plus 3. And now if you solve for x, subtract 3, you get x equals plus minus 2. But remember in the problem it says, let f of x equal x squared plus 3 for x greater than or equal to 0. So we're only going to look at the positive solution. So x equals 2, which means that f of 2 equals 7. So g of 7 is going to equal 2. So g of 7 equals 2. All right, on to question 2, which says find g prime of 7. So for this question, to figure out the answer to this question, there's a formula that you could memorize. I'll show you guys how to derive that formula in case you ever forget the formula on a test or something. And then if you remember how to derive it, you can just always find that formula. So first, let's write down the statement. So f of g of x equals x. Now you might ask, why is this statement true? Well, we figured this out in question 1. If I were to ask you what f of g of 7 is, well, you would start from the inside. G of 7 is 2. And then f of 2 is just 7. You can just replace g of 7 with 2. And then f of 2, it's right here, which is 7, right? So basically, whatever you plug in as your input, 7, you got that as your output. So they just cancel each other out, the two functions. So we want to figure out what g prime of 7 is, and this notation just means the derivative. This means the derivative. So let's take the derivative of both sides. d of dx. Let's take the derivative of the left side first. So that would be, first you do the derivative of the outside, f prime, and then you keep the inside the same, g of x, and then you multiply it by the derivative of the inside. This is the chain rule. So that's the derivative of the left side. And now the derivative of the right side, it's just 1. Since we're solving for g prime of 7, and we have g prime of x right here, let's just get g prime of x by itself. So f prime g of x, f prime g of x, cancel, so g prime of x equals 1 over f prime g of x. So this is your formula, and remember, if you just know how to derive it, I feel that's much easier to remember than memorizing the formula. So now, since we have what the formula for g prime of x, we can just plug in 7. So g prime of 7 is going to equal 1 over f prime of g of 7. Okay, now this means that we need to figure out what g of 7 is. And we already have that here. We figured that out in the first problem. G of 7 is just 2. Which means g prime of 7 is going to equal 1 over f prime of 2. Because you can just replace g of 7 with 2, right? So now we need to figure out what f prime of 2 is. And don't confuse f prime of 2 with f of 2. We need to take the derivative of f. We need to take the derivative of f of x and find f prime of x, and then we need to plug in 2 to find f prime of 2. So let's do that. F of x equals x squared plus 3. F prime of x equals 2x. And now we're trying to find f prime of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. Which means f prime of 2 is going to equal 4. Now we know what f prime of 2 is, which means g prime of 7, g prime 7 is going to equal 1 over 4. So let me just write that down here. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.